Hey y'all, I'm Katie, and this is Lacy, and together we are Budget Bitch. Good girl, Boo Boo. Here you go, Boo Boo. Love you so much. Hey everybody, and welcome to another week on Budget Bitch. This week we're talking about things that change in our life that then affect our finances. But first, let's do a weekly check-in. I'm going to start here on my income tasks calendar for the month of January. You can see I've updated my income list on the right. I also checked off a few tasks that I needed to do. Now let's look at my week 2 expenses. I put another $25 on my Starbucks card. I know you're going to look at that and say, Katie, that says $22.78. That's because I had a couple dollars in my PayPal account from a Google Rewards thing, like a survey thing. And I don't really account for that because it's totally random. It just gets absorbed into whatever the next PayPal payment I make. So usually that's Starbucks. Then restaurants, I ate out a few times, and miscellaneous is suspiciously empty. That's maybe a little misleading, but I will get to that in a moment. Check out my sinking funds. I made a second sinking funds payment. This time dividing it up into birthdays, car care, renter's insurance, and then that $55 at the bottom is just sort of a buffer. I decided to make this first month's payment a little bit bigger so I have a little extra cash in case anything is more expensive than I thought it would be. And now my January overview page, I'm just going to check in on my goals so I can say them out loud. The weekly check-ins are going great. These videos are a great way to hold me accountable for them, and man, they're really helping me be thoughtful about my spending. This month in particular, I've sensed it in the Starbucks world, where I sort of think, like, do I really want another Starbucks? Do I want to have to explain why I spent $100 at Starbucks instead of $75 this month? No. Let's skip it today. I have not yet bought my OCPs either. That's an easy one. Finishing my website is a big one. And I have started that process. It's a little overwhelming, I'm not going to lie. But I have a feeling that once I kind of get on a roll, it won't take quite so much time. We're only halfway through the month, so hopefully I can still get it done. The events I mentioned before, I think I'm going to delay my car registration. And Claire, her birthday is this month, but we probably won't celebrate it till next month. So that's fine. The money's in the sinking funds, and it'll be there when we do it next month. And then for my favorite part, the weekly check-in at the bottom, you can see that the weekly sort of goal is $34 for Starbucks, and I have spent $47.78. That number is higher than, it's higher than it should be, but also I have more than half of that $25 chunk in my Starbucks card to spend this coming week. So my goal is to be able to get through this week without having to re-up my $25, and then I'll have another $25 charge sometime in the week of the 22nd to get me through the rest of the month. We'll see how it goes. Restaurants coming in under budget. I'm pretty proud of us. We love to eat out, and we are not shy about it. We have our weekly DoorDash date. We have a weekly poke date, which every Sunday, man, I gotta have my poke and my bubble tea. And we even had some Chick-fil-A. We made it under budget. It's great. Miscellaneous, like we saw before, there was no addition. And last week I was under budget too. It's a little misleading. We'll get there. Lastly, just checking in on my car payoff. No news there. I didn't make any payments this past week. So I mentioned that my miscellaneous spending was a little bit misleading this month, and also I didn't make any payments towards my car. Normally I would have by this point. The reason for both of those things is that things change. I mentioned it in a video about budgets a week or two ago, that a good thing to keep in mind about budgets is your budget is going to change because your life is going to change and your money changes. Sometimes it changes for totally bummer reasons, right? Maybe somebody lost their job, or you didn't get a bonus you were expecting. Maybe something broke and your emergency fund wasn't fully funded, and so now you're having to pull money from a different source. There are a million reasons why things can change. The good news is sometimes things change for great reasons, and I'm happy to report that that's the case for me. My boyfriend and I got engaged on January 1st, and we are planning on getting married a couple weeks from now at the end of the month, giving us 1 month to plan our very small intimate wedding. A lot of people have asked, why are you getting married so fast? To which I would like to say, it's none of your business. But I don't mind actually sharing. There are a few reasons why we decided to get married so quickly after we got engaged. One is maybe the most important. We did a lot of the engagement style prep work, having conversations about how we wanted to live our lives, what our values are, our decisions about kids and houses and where we wanted to live. All of those big conversations, we had those as boyfriend and girlfriend. So we didn't really feel like emotionally we needed too much time to have those conversations. We already had them. So the communication that we had as partners before we got engaged, I think is paramount to why we wanted to get married so quickly. We don't want to be engaged. We want to be married. Another thing is we already live together. My fiance has a daughter, and I think most people who have kids in a new relationship would agree that having kids means that you decide if it's serious earlier than maybe if there aren't kids involved. We've already sort of been in this place of marriage. We just haven't taken the final step of getting married. The last reason is that there are a lot of financial benefits for us getting married. As a military member, I get paid half in salary and half in allowances. And those allowances depend on what zip code you live in and whether or not you have dependents. Those allowances are for housing and for food. My housing allowance will go up when I'm married because I will now have a husband and a stepdaughter. They're my dependents, and so I get a little bump in my allowance for that. It's only going to be for me a couple $100, so it's not an insane amount of money. But we are planning on having a second wedding when COVID is over and all of our family can be in the same room and hug each other and share germs galore. And at that point, we will just be saving all of those $200 bumps in my pay to pay for that wedding. Also, my fiance will no longer have to buy his own health insurance, which he's currently doing because he will be able to be on my health insurance. So it seems silly to wait to get married when we could be taking advantage of those financial reasons. If we weren't already at the emotional place of being ready to be married, if we hadn't already had so much communication prior to the engagement, I would absolutely be a proponent of waiting longer. But since we're in that place already emotionally, let's just do it. Let's get married. I already mentioned it, but I got to give a huge shout out to my buddy, communication. Communication has been so key to this process. My boyfriend and I, my fiance and I, back when we were just boyfriend, girlfriend, we talked money very early. I can definitely speak for myself here. I had relationships in the past where money was not an easy thing to talk about. And I think that was true for my fiance too. We came from relationships where money wasn't talked about or it was talked about very emotionally. And so I had heard a podcast many moons ago about having money dates. And I suggested it to my fiance and he was into it. We were both terrible at it at first. In case you haven't heard of it, a money date is where you set a time, you get together, you talk about money, whatever that means for your relationship. For us at the time, we were just dating, so it didn't actually mean that much. We didn't share any money at the time, but it was just a way for us to talk about money. And what happens is we talked about money so much that when we moved in together and money was now something we needed to talk about in relationship to each other and not just our own finances, we were already used to it. We had a vernacular that we were used to using. We weren't emotional about it. I wasn't embarrassed about telling him about my debt or anything like that. He already knew about it. And now, as engaged people, soon to be a married couple, it's been so streamlined to just now move into how are we going to combine our finances. We also learned a lot about each other and our values regarding money. Wherever you are in your relationship, if you've been married for 50 years or if you've been dating someone for a month, there is a way to incorporate communication about money so that it is helping each of you grow in your way, in your own way, to be able to talk about money and share those ideas and find your common values. And now for the nitty gritty. There are some numbers that needed to be crunched. There are some big logistics that have had to shift. And so let's get into it. Number one is, how are we paying for the wedding? Just to be clear, we are having a very small wedding, no guests, at the end of this month. But we are planning on having a larger ceremony and party for our family and friends next year. Oh, hi, Lacy. You're invited to the wedding. Did I tell you she's going to walk me down the aisle? What was I talking about? You interrupted me. Oh, right. We are going to have we are going to have a celebration with our family and friends next year, hopefully when COVID won't prevent us from doing so. So when I'm talking about paying for the wedding right now, I'm just talking about wedding one. Why one wedding when you're going to have two weddings? Wedding one is at the end of this month. It's not going to be crazy expensive, but there are still expenses. And I didn't have any cash set aside for things like getting married in a few weeks. Let me just quickly explain my income structure. I have my full-time job, military. That is the money I live off of. That's my whole budget in terms of living expenses. I also have a large part-time job where I get paid every 2 weeks on a W-2, and it's not the same amount every month or every 2 weeks, but it is consistent income. I do get paid every 2 weeks, and so that's kind of a big chunk of a job. It's a chunky job. And that job, currently, all of that money goes towards debt repayment or savings. I also have a little bit of income from a couple other side hustles, for lack of a better term, little gig work, things like that. All of that money goes to debt repayment. In fact, if you have not watched my video about the 3 things I did to help pay off my debt faster, I recommend you do. I've linked it down below because it's related to this topic, and making sure that all of that money went towards my debt repayment instead of trying to use a little bit of it for my own expenses, that was a game changer. Now, normally, my most recent paycheck from my part-time job would go towards my car payoff. But since I didn't have money to pay for this wedding, I decided that one time only, I would use that paycheck to pay for this wedding. So I've paid for several things in the past couple of weeks, and that is all coming out of that paycheck. If it doesn't quite cover it, I still have my money in my miscellaneous funds. Either way, that miscellaneous money will either pay for whatever wedding stuff I didn't quite cover in that one paycheck, or it will go towards my savings if I end up having a lot over. Like I said, there weren't that many things to buy, but there were a few things. I bought a wedding band, I bought a coat because we are getting married outside, and so instead of a wedding dress, I got a wedding coat. I'm super jazzed about this because it just means for the next many, many years, I can go out and grab my wedding coat to go out in the winter instead of having a dress that I wore maybe once and then never wore again. I'm really excited about that. Now, the big nitty-gritty is how we're combining finances. We have decided to combine our finances the following way. We'll have a joint account where we pay for our shared expenses like the house and utilities, food, things like that, and we'll keep our individual accounts to pay for things, for me, like my car payment or student loan debt, things like that. We'll also have several joint savings accounts for fun things like wedding savings and honeymoon savings and vacation savings, and of course, an emergency fund. I think it's also important to note that we make pretty similar amounts of money, and so for now, we share everything 50-50, but we have given ourselves permission moving forward, if one of us were to start making more money, to revisit this conversation and see if we should change how much we contribute to our joint account based on our income. It is gonna be a ton of work up front. I would love it if you've been through this process, if you have changed your name when you got married, or if you have gone through the process of opening joint accounts and moving your utilities and things like that over to that joint account, I am here for your tips and tricks, because that is the only part of this process that feels a little bit overwhelming. It's just the idea of like, oh my gosh, it's going to be 6 years from now, I'm going to realize I forgot to change my name with whatever place that I do business with every couple of years, right? Ugh. Help me out. We are refinancing our house, which I'm really excited about. We've turned in all the paperwork, and we are hopeful that we'll be able to sign everything pretty soon after we get married. It's I think it's such a great time to refinance. So hopefully we can save a lot of money on interest, because I think we're going to be able to get a way better interest rate in the current climate right now. I will tell you, we are waiting to hear from our realtor about different options for 15-year mortgage or 30-year mortgage, and I will report back. In fact, I'll probably do a whole episode on refinancing for noobs like me. I've never owned a home before, so this will be my first time. We'll see how it goes. Now, I know you're all dying to know, what does this mean for my budget and my debt payoff plan? Well, first of all, it means the beautiful budget I showed you, a week or two ago, is not entirely useless, but it's having to be reworked. I did make a new budget spreadsheet. It's still a work in progress, but it has a lot of the same signature things from my old spreadsheet, including a sinking funds page and a transactions page for each month. I did change up the way I did my monthly expenses, though. How I listed them and how I categorized them. That way, at the end of the year, I can more easily calculate things like how much money I made, how much money I spent in certain categories, things like that. As I finish it, as I really get all of the numbers in there, then I'll share this with you in a later video. Of course, I don't know how much our mortgage will be yet, so it's difficult to fully complete my numbers, but I'm getting there. For my debt payoff, in my current budget, like I mentioned, I send all of the money from my part-time jobs, my gig work, towards debt repayment. And then I also send quite a bit of money from my second paycheck from my military job towards debt repayment. Looking at the numbers, again, I'm not sure because of our mortgage, but looking at the numbers, it looks like that will probably not be the case anymore. We as a couple are saving for many things now that we were not saving for before. And so I think it's really important to pay cash for those things. I want to pay cash for my honeymoon. I also want to use a lot of airline points, just to be clear. But I do not want to use my credit cards for it. I don't want to be going into debt to take a vacation with my husband. I want to pay cash, and I want to start our marriage off on a cash foot. You know what I mean? So we set up a lot of different savings accounts for those things. That's taking more of my normal monthly budget income, but I think it's the right place to go. I shared a video of my 2021 goals. It was one of the first videos of the year that I shared, because I think it's really important to set goals and to strive to reach them. And based on my calculations, if everything stays exactly the way it is now, I still should be able to reach all of those goals by the end of the year. One of the things that is changing is my 6-month savings fund. One of my 2021 goals was to have a 6-month emergency fund funded. But now my emergency fund is joined with my fiance's. We will have a 6-month emergency fund. It needs to be much bigger now because before I was paying rent, and so 6 months of rent is different than 6 months of a mortgage. So our joint account, our first goal is to get a 3-month emergency fund, and then we'll build from there to 6 months. But it honestly was a little overwhelming to try and fund a 6-month fund and pay cash for our wedding and pay cash for our honeymoon. And we feel like it's important to do all of those things. I will also build a smaller emergency fund just for myself. I don't have a lot of expenses. By the time the year is over, I won't have a car payment anymore or things like that. But I will need to have savings for car maintenance or, personal emergencies. So I need to refigure what that savings goal is. And I'll do that once I know more what my numbers look like for the year, once we have our mortgage payment figured out. But besides that, I should be able to keep my sinking funds going, pay off my car, pay off my personal loans from my family, and get my retirement contribution up to 17%. So I'm really glad that I'm still able to reach those goals, even as I have these new shifting goals and priorities enter my life. Now some words from Lacy. Change is inevitable. Planning for it is great, but being open to it is even better. You can't always plan for every single thing that happens, But you can keep a mentality that life is going to change, and as beautiful as your life is now, a change could make it even more beautiful. Be flexible. Be willing to change your budget. Be willing to change your plans, because life will someday demand it of you. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week. I look very sad about it, Lacy. Why are you so sad?